Globalization is also another one of these mega trends that is impacting the corporate communicator's job. And I'm just going to show you some quick slides. I like the second definition here of globalization. It's an ongoing process by which regional economies, societies, and cultures have become integrated through a globe-spanning network of communication and execution. And so globalization, when we think about it, we think, well, what that means is outsourcing of jobs from the US to China and India and other places. Well, it's a lot more than that. And it's a lot more complex than that. And it's about creating new markets for maybe even American products to be shipped all over the world. It's about lifting people out of poverty. It's about a whole lot of things. But it also changes, and I've got an old slide up here. As recently as I think it was 1960 something, 45% of the world's GDP was in the United States. Today that number is less than 24%. And so you talk about gross domestic product, you talk about the size of the economy. The US is still the largest economy in the world, but we're no longer as dominant as we once were. And so dealing in multiple languages, dealing in multiple cultures, and dealing with a 24-hour cycle has made life much more difficult for corporate communicators. China and India, that's not accurate. China has become the second largest economy in the world. India is the fastest growing economy in the world today. They're not fourth yet, but they're moving up quickly. Also, one thing that has changed radically as we look at economics and communication is that between 40 and 45% of the world's wealth was estimated to have been destroyed by the credit and banking crisis that we experienced in 2008. And if you think about that, I mean, that's just a phenomenal, phenomenal number. And so when something happens in one region of the world, it's not isolated any longer to that region of the world. Instead, it impacts economies, and there's a snowball effect, and pretty soon you've got a worldwide economic crisis instead of just a banking crisis in the US. This shows the growth of China. For years and years and years, Japan has been the second largest economy in the world. And you look at Japan's number there, that blue line, they've been up and down, and they've had some growth and some stagnation, but it's been essentially flat growth for a long time. This chart goes back to 2000. So over the last 10 years, while Japan's economy has been relatively flat, China's has looked more like a hockey stick and is growing rapidly. And just recently, I think in December, China, their economy was estimated to be 4.9 trillion, and Japan was at 4.6 trillion. So we think that China has now passed Japan and is the second largest economy behind the US right now. Global trade imbalances, you look at the difference between established economies like the US and what we're calling emerging economies, which would be Russia, India, China. Now they're adding Vietnam to that. They're adding several other countries to that. But if you look at current account balances, you see that the blue line, the developed countries, which would include Europe and the US, our account balances are trending downwards, which means we're spending more than we're actually selling. And the emerging economies, you see that they're growing very rapidly. So we're kind of going in opposite directions here, and you have to ask yourself the question, what is going to happen to the US standard of living? And is it possible that the next generation is going to be perhaps the first generation in a long time that does not have a standard of living that's higher than their parents? It's possible. Again, you talk about rapid growth, emerging economies growing rapidly, the established and developed countries are kind of up and down, but generally flat. The US economy, this chart is a little hard to read. The largest line there to the far left is the European Union. So that's not one country, that's all of the countries of Europe. If you group them all together, their economy is larger than the US. But if you look at this, you see that the US is about 14 trillion here. And the next largest, this chart still says Japan and China, but they're kind of tied there. They're at about 4. So 14 to 4. We still have an economy that's about 3.5 times larger than the next largest. But you saw those trend lines and the direction that they're going. And it's not impossible to think that the U.S. economy may be flat or growing slowly, and these other economies in the world may be growing much more rapidly. We may no longer be the largest economy in the world in another 20, 30 years. Well, what's the positive impact of globalization? The positive impact is that you lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. India is a great example of this. We had at one of our conferences a gentleman named Fareed Zakaria speak. And some of you may know him as a commentator on CNN. He's also written several books. He's the international editor for Newsweek. Fareed Zakaria was born in India. And he said that when he was growing up, the dream of Indians was to come to the U.S. because the U.S. was the land of opportunity. He said today that is no longer true in India. He said now Indians who are going to college, who are young and aspiring and dreaming about what they're going to do, they don't necessarily want to come to the U.S. Instead, they want to make their fortune and they want to grow their own economy and they want to help build India rather than coming to the U.S. So that's a real radical shift in attitudes, and I think it also is indicative of the growth opportunities in India with a population of 1 billion people. It could be one of the larger markets. Certainly it is one of the largest markets in the world. And as people come out of poverty and create a middle class there, it also creates an opportunity for all kinds of companies around the globe. They now have customers. They can sell things to customers. So all the economies may be lifted as we see the effects of globalization. Creating new consumer markets and economic opportunity could obviously be good for not only India, but it could be good for the U.S., could be good for anybody selling products. Implications for corporations. Obviously, this adds a layer of complexity, increasing responsibilities in a variety of cultures. The way you do business in one country may be entirely different than the way you want to do it in the next country. And so you also have this loss of control. You can no longer have a command and control structure where you dictate this is how we do business and we're going to do it the same way everywhere and regardless of culture, regardless of communities. So you have to give up some control, build in some flexibility, and begin to build relationships in local economies and local cultures. It really multiplies the communication challenges and the risks that are associated. Obviously, there are political risks, there are economic risks, financial risks, and companies that sell or make products anywhere around the globe have to be cognizant of these risks, and they can have a dramatic impact on your corporation. So you can see that the role of the corporate communication executive is no longer a very simple media relations function, no longer a simple case of, I used to be a journalist, I understand how the media works, let me talk to them and I'll take care of this problem for you. The job is much, much more complex today. And as it's complex, it's fair to ask the question, can public relations professionals actually step up to these new challenges and new responsibilities?